Okay, before we go further onto the other types of buoys, just because we're still talking about channels, I wanted to touch briefly on the Intracoastal Waterway. So this is a United States specific thing. This is not a IALA regulation, but it's a system that the U.S. uses specifically within their own coastal and inland waterways to kind of direct nation scale traffic throughout the country, mostly for like private yachters, private boaters, just people taking pleasure craft around, as a very easy means for them to navigate in and around the U.S. waters nice and effectively. So what it is, here's my very realistic depiction of the United States. What it is it's just essentially a traffic pattern to follow anywhere you're along the coast and the inland waters, specifically the Mississippi and the Great Lakes, a direction to follow. Now, if we were on the East Coast, the Intracoastal Waterway is just essentially instructing you, if you're sailing along the coast of the United States, imagine that there is a channel, like a entrance channel, going all along the outside of the coast, its full length, and then up the Mississippi, into the Great Lakes, and out the St. Lawrence, going clockwise. So it's always wrapping in this direction. Doesn't mean you can't go counterclockwise, but you should think of the channel as primarily moving you in a clockwise direction. I believe on the West Coast it is going south, but that might be wrong, I'm not certain. And the way it works is, like any other channel, it has buoys along its length. And so because we're thinking of ourselves as moving this way, think that you're returning from sea in this direction, the channels will be marked as such. So we're in IALA B. If you're going this way, you'll have red right returning, but it's not colored red because this is the Intracoastal Waterway. But you should also remember that red buoys are triangles. So you'll have triangles on the right and squares on the left. You can see that shown in the guide as it says, anytime a ship is following the ICW, the Intracoastal Waterway, yellow triangles should be passed on the starboard side, yellow squares should be passed on the port side. Yellow bands have no lateral information, but you'll see these more of the time. And the reason it doesn't say triangle dayboards or square dayboards is because these are not dayboards. These are little symbols drawn onto buoys or dayboards to indicate that this is secondarily being used as part of the Intracoastal Waterway. So in the case of the diagram that they showed here, in this situation, coming into port, there's nothing special about these buoys out here. They're just doing their normal jobs. But as you get up to here, you can see there are little yellow squares on these two buoys, and little yellow triangles in these two, and squares and triangles on these two. And what you can see is that there's a line of squares on these buoys out here. It doesn't matter what color the buoys are, whether they're red or green, they still have squares, and a line of triangles there. And what that means is, while this is the normal channel to enter the channel, or to enter into the harbor, the Intracoastal Waterway happens to be passing through the area, going this way. And it is, any buoys it passes by are secondarily noted as being part of the waterway with those little yellow squares or triangles. Doesn't have any meaning for the entrance channel, but it just means that, hey, you can still use this as part of the waterway. That way, if you happen to be sailing in and around the area of the United States, you don't have to be going this way, but you know if you have the triangles on your right and the squares on your left, that means you're headed south down the coast of the United States into the Gulf of Mexico and eventually up the Mississippi. If you're headed the other way, if you have the triangles on your left, it means you're headed northwards along the East Coast. And the same is true here, though again, our primary direction is that way. So this is not something you're going to see in other countries. It only applies to the US, and it only applies, it's relatively uncommon, it only applies to situations where you're headed coastwise, really close to shore, close enough that you can actually be using the channel buoys that happen to be outside of harbors. They will just direct traffic throughout the United States so that you can kind of always have a basic understanding of which direction you're going if you're traveling in this area.